going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video, and today it's the Game Week 30 preview. So as always, I'm going to go through some of your questions and topics that you've put to me on YouTube and Twitter, and just give you my thoughts and opinions. And there's no beating around the bush on this one. Let's jump straight into it. So I know a lot of the talk this morning, at least on Twitter and stuff like that, is about the postponement of the Man City versus Arsenal game. So there'll no longer be a double game week in Game Week 29. There's not really too much more to talk about on that. I've already put out a video this morning. There's nothing we can change about it. There's no use worrying about it. If you had like Aubameyang captain like me, then you just get a single game week player, 2 points into 4, and that is your lot. If you've got De Bruyne, a player's going to come off your bench, whoever's first on your bench. And obviously, if you captained a player that didn't play, then your vice captain comes into play as well. So it is what it is. Some people will benefit, some people will lose out because of it. Not much we can do. We just move on. The game week will finish, and that game, as long as the fixtures keep happening, that game will be put into a different game week. So personally, I'm not really too worried about it. Like I said, it doesn't happen very often, but you know, these things in life do happen. So let's not spend all our time worrying about it. Let's just move on and look to Game Week 30. So is Vardy back? Is he keep or sell? What is it with Jamie Vardy right now? And we seem to be going round and round in circles with Jamie Vardy. Lots held on during the rough times, and obviously were kind of a bit disappointed that he didn't play in Game Week 28. And then Rodgers' press conferences kind of indicated that he would be on the bench, and that's exactly what happened. But 30 minutes later, 2 goals, and bam, suddenly he's back into our consideration. People are saying we need him for the run-in, wondering whether to keep him, etc., etc. And I think you can look at this a couple of different ways. So on the one hand, Leicester did play okay. I watched that game against Aston Villa. I wouldn't say they were brilliant. I think a lot of it was down to Aston Villa's defending as well as kind of Leicester's attacking potential. And obviously, Ndidi was back, so that's a bit of a boost to Leicester. And by the time the game finished, they mostly had their first 11 on the pitch. Ndidi and Vardy were playing. Obviously, Pereira's didn't play, so it's annoying if you own him. But Harvey Barnes is looking good, and you'd expect them to mostly play that formation. Maybe Tielemans comes back in at some point, but Pratt has been pretty good in that kind of that position next to Ndidi, or next to Maddison, but just in front of Ndidi, but providing a bit more cover. And on the other hand, they were playing Aston Villa, and they were awful. So I'm not quite sure whether I think Leicester are back or not. They could have scored from a couple of corners. Maddison whipped in some really good balls. So if you're a Maddison owner, Evans and both Evans and Soyuncu potentially could have scored. But obviously, when you look at the goals, it was Reyna's big mistake for one of them, obviously coming way outside of his box. And ultimately, just some poor defending all round. I wouldn't say, the second Harvey Barnes goal was pretty nice. But overall, I wouldn't say kind of Leicester dominated just because they were that much better. I feel like some of it, not all of it, was down to Aston Villa being worse. So if you look at the fixtures, they've got Watford away. That's a really hard one to call, to be honest. Then it's a blank. Everton away, Palace at home, Arsenal away. So next 5 fixtures, 3 away games, Watford, Everton, Arsenal. It's not really the perfect set of fixtures, and obviously Vardy does blank as well. So if you own him and you're in a position where you can keep him, then fair enough. I don't see why you might not consider that. But I'm certainly not looking at bringing them in. I'd want to see at least one more game with them back with a full squad, just to see if they're in a good bit of form now, or how much of that was Aston Villa. So I don't think, I say this about a few players, I don't think there's a rush to sell, but I also definitely don't think there's a rush to buy. Ings out, and then Jota in was part of the question. Is he the obvious move? So at this stage, I'm not really sure how many more times I can keep saying it, but lots of frustration around Danny Ings. And it feels like it's every week we're saying that at this point. And it's a bit frustrating because the last 2 weeks, one, he misses out. We don't find out about that training or the injury, which has meant he couldn't train properly until after the deadline. He could have been mentioned in the press conference, but it wasn't. And then this week, he plays, but they get a red card, so he has to play more than half the game, or a lot of his time at least, playing out on the wing, which is obviously no good for any striker for the most part. Aubameyang does okay, but Danny Ings is not quite the same as Aubameyang when it comes to pace and stuff like that, which helps obviously on the wing. So that's a bit unfortunate. He's not really going to have done much from the wing, and he didn't. So it's another blank. I think that's only 1 goal now in 7 games, so definitely out of form. And I'm an owner, and at this point, looking at the fixtures, Norwich away, which I think is fairly difficult, to be honest. Then it's a blank. Watford away, not great. Man City at home. Everton away. Man United away. He did do well earlier in the season in these fixtures, but for me, it's time for him to go. Now, I'm not saying you have to rush out and do it for the Norwich game. I will probably keep, because I have other things that I want to do this week. But if you've got a spare transfer, maybe even 2 transfers, and you want to bring in someone like Jota or Deeney ahead of the double game week, the blank game week, I should say, not double, who also have better fixtures after the blank as well, And I really do feel like it's Danny Ings' time is up. Made a bit of money on him if you got on him early. It's not quite happened for him in recent weeks. It could happen again before the end of the season. Obviously, he's fully fit, playing week in, week out for the most part, apart from the game week he missed a couple of weeks ago. So I do think, there's something he could do before the end of the season. I just think at the moment there's better options, and Jota could be one. So for me, it's Ings out. It doesn't have to be this week, but I think by the blank, I'll definitely be getting rid. And then similar to Aubameyang, do we give him a few more weeks? And obviously, before I recorded this, I was going to talk about how he had one more game against Man City, but now that's not happened. So it'd be interesting to see where that game fits in. Obviously, at the moment, there's a lot of reaction to what's going on with this virus and stuff. So, you look to Serie A, and that's kind of, potentially looking like it could be cancelled or the game's put off for a long period of time. We don't know if that's going to happen in the Premier League yet. It may not, so there's no point in worrying about it. And also, I'm kind of the opinion that you just keep going with the info you have. And right now, the info you have is the Man City Arsenal game's postponed. It will get put back in at some point. We don't know when, so don't hold a player just because of that game week. So I think Aubameyang is very much chip dependent. So for me, I'm not free hitting in game week 31. And I probably need the cash to get in Mane. It's kind of him or Mane, and I know who I'd rather have right now. If you are free hitting in game week 31, then he does have Brighton away this week. And Norwich are home in game week 32, so it could be worth keeping him. I think that game week 32 fixture is pretty interesting as a captaincy option, and I know he's frustrating against West Ham, but he has been consistent for most of the season. In that game week, Liverpool play Man City, so you could captain a player from either of those sides, but it's a tricky game, I think. Leicester play Everton away. Man United are at Brighton, so maybe Fernandes is an option there, but I think Aubameyang against Norwich at home could be a shrewd differential. So I think he's a bit like Vardy. I'm not sure I would necessarily be bringing in Aubameyang right now, but if you owned him and you didn't need the money, or there wasn't a player that you had to bring in that you had to get the money from Aubameyang for, then I'd definitely look at probably keeping him. Brighton away, Norwich at home, potentially an outside captaincy option in game week 32. Definitely not a must-sell for me. So moving on, is it time for Chelsea players? Obviously, it feels like ages since we had those early days of kind of having Abraham, maybe Mason Mount in our team. We've not really been near Chelsea players. And when I say, we, the majority of people, FPL managers, haven't really been on Chelsea players for a little while. Unless you got, obviously, Marcus Alonso in recently. So because they've just beaten Everton 4-0, suddenly they're on our radar, and they have Aston Villa up next. And as I've talked about with Leicester, Aston Villa are awful, and I can definitely see goals in that Chelsea game. I don't think that's really much of an out there prediction for Chelsea to get goals at Aston Villa. So I think out of all the players, Alonso's definitely the one I'd be looking at. His points per match is incredible, very attacking. We saw him get 2 goals in a match recently enough. And he seems to be playing, whether they play with wing backs or just in the back four as a left back. So he's kind of like won his place back. And he seems to be playing most weeks now. Obviously, Villa's a great fixture. They've conceded so many attempts and shots all season. I wouldn't see that changing unless Dean Smith kind of changes something drastically there. So a punt this week is good, especially if you're on kind of a strategy where you're free hitting in game week 31. It means you can get Chelsea players against Villa, not worry about having to bench them or whatever in game week 31, and then still have them for game week 32 because they've got quite a nice run until the end of the season. Obviously, if you're not free hitting in game week 31, it becomes a little bit trickier. My only concern is how much should we be concerned about rotation? Because Marcus Alonso, yes, he's back in, but at what point does he get taken back out? Recently, it looked like Reece James was nailed. Then he missed the Everton game, only played 30 minutes. Lampard does like to change it about quite a bit. In midfield, they've got lots of options. Obviously, up front, Giroud's playing right now, but when Abraham's back, will he just step back into the team? There's lots of unknowns there, which would put me off Chelsea a little bit. But that being said, they are quite lowly owned. They do have Aston Villa up next. Alonso could get a mega haul. He's a huge differential, could get you up the rankings. So I can see why people are going for it. I do worry about the rotation threat. But there are much cheaper prices than the likes of Liverpool players, etc. So maybe it's worth the little bit of added risk. How many players are okay for game week 31? Look, we're going to get this question asked every single week before a blank game week. And obviously this is for anyone not free hitting. If you're free hitting, you kind of want 11 players. I would say about 8 to 9 quality players is fine. You have to be prepared basically to go into this game week. Other FPL managers will have 9 to 11 players, and there will be people free hitting. They'll have full squads, and they might score more than you. That could happen. So this week it might be difficult to keep up, but obviously if someone's free hitting, it means they don't have it later on in the season. If they've not free hitting and they've got a full squad of 11, well, they've got a whole team that's not going to have double game weeks down the line, most likely. So there's those things to consider. So it's not the be-all and end-all of game week 31, but 8 to 9 quality players that you actually want to keep is what I would be looking about. We've discussed this quite a bit already in detail. So 3 Liverpool, 2 to 3 Wolves, maybe Antonio, Ali, Sarr, Dini, and a goalkeeper potentially. Charlie Taylor as a bench option, whatever it might be. But you don't have to go nuts. And for hits, because people are going to talk about this as well, I think it really depends whether you generally want to keep a player. So I'll give you 2 examples. Let's say you move for game week 31, you still had Danny Ings left in your team, but you didn't have Troy Deeney. For me, Deeney is worth a -4, because even if he doesn't necessarily repay it that week, it's a little bit of a low risk to make that move anyway, because Ings isn't playing. So if you've only got 10 players and you're not going to be able to play Ings, then taking a hit gives you hopefully at least 2 appearance points. So it's kind of a reduced risk on the hit, for me at least. That's how I look at it. And then obviously Deeney's got much better fixtures after the blank as well, so that would be okay. But for example, if you had Mane, and to get to 11 players you were going to take him out for someone like McNeil, well, then you're definitely going to want Mane back afterwards. You're probably not going to want to keep McNeil long term, and then I'd consider that not such a good move. So hits are fine, but don't go too nuts. Think about if you want to keep the player long term, and don't panic about having 11 players. It's not the end of the world. And then I'll quickly go through what I think is the best game week 31 players to hold. So players that might be worth holding afterwards. So 3 Liverpool players, obviously, but they're not going to get, at least at the moment, they're not going to get any double game weeks. So don't get too attached. At some point, you might have to drop them. Jimenez +1 Wolves defender, I think, is fine. Doherty or Size preferably. Jota could be okay. I don't know how many weeks after kind of game week 31 and 32 you'd want to hold him, but Jimenez has been so consistent. I think Deeney and Sarr, if you look at Watford's fixtures and how they performed under Pearson, I think they're worth a hold as well. Charlie Taylor I mentioned as an enabler, potentially a goalkeeper like Nick Pope or Ben Foster, especially with Foster's fixtures going forward for the rest of the season, he could be decent enough. I'm not really too keen on Bournemouth, just because defensively I just don't see clean sheets there. Attacking wise, they've kind of been a bit all over the place. Maybe someone like Van Arnold, but again, fixtures aren't ideal afterwards, and I'm not really sure what to make of Spurs. So the players I mentioned are probably the best, or the ones that I would be looking to hold after game week 31, and that means I wouldn't be too against bringing them in for the blank. I do think captaincy is a little bit tricky this week in that there's not really a standout option. Now, the Man City cancellation against Arsenal is actually quite interesting because Pep, we'll have to wait until the press conferences to get more info, but Pep was kind of talking about that De Bruyne would need minutes to kind of get into a rhythm. We hear Pep talk about that before. The players need rhythm. Obviously, if you're going into the Real Madrid match, you don't want to have missed kind of 2 or 3 games and have not played for a little while. So I do think minutes against Burnley looks likely for Kevin De Bruyne unless we hear more news that he's not going to be available. The key question is, are you happy to bet on him starting? Because yes, he can come off the bench like any player and get points. But let's be honest, when we use our captainship, we want to use it on a player that is going to start. So if you're confident he's going to start, I think De Bruyne against Burnley could also, or almost, argued to be probably the best pick this week if he's going to start. Although Burnley haven't been any pushovers recently. Everton versus Liverpool is kind of where I'm going. So Everton just lost 4-0 to Chelsea. So it shows that they're there to be kind of taken advantage of. I think they do have vulnerabilities at the back. Obviously Liverpool, we know they're in great form. Mane looks really good. Salah, obviously with Milner back, maybe not got penalties. When he plays with Mane, potentially Mane is the slightly better option. But on their day, they could both score big. So as a kind of, look, Liverpool are great, I'll just captain them every week kind of captain. I think, again, it's fine, absolutely fine to captain them again this week against Everton. I don't think it's a massively tough fixture, but I'm not a huge fan of captaining players in derbies like this because you just don't know how they're going to go. So Mane, Salah, fine. But I do think if De Bruyne starts, he's got a good chance of outscoring. But even if De Bruyne starts, how many minutes will he get? Will his minutes be managed? Will be off like 55, 60 minute mark to be kind of fit for Real Madrid? It's a tough one. So maybe it is just worth going safe and going with Liverpool. Leicester, again, if you think Leicester are back now, Vardy's in and Ndidi's in, they're about to go on a run of form, that could be a good fixture. But Watford are not pushovers, and they haven't been under Pearson. So that wouldn't be a high-scoring game, but we know that Jamie Vardy only needs a couple of chances to get goal, plus some bonus points. So it could be a good option. Spurs versus Man United. Look, Spurs have been awful, and Fernandes has been amazing. But I know what's happening in that game. Jose Mourinho is going to park the bus and hope to keep the score down. Now, whether or not he can do that is a different question, but that's what he's going to attempt, and that was probably what would put me off captaining Fernandes. Man United has some very good fixtures coming up from Game Week 32 onwards, so I'm definitely looking at captaining him then. Just not sure about the Spurs match, and it's probably worth mentioning Aubameyang against Brighton away. Away game, maybe not so good for Aubameyang, but he has been quite consistent this season. So I don't think there really is a massive standout option. I think for me, if I bring Mane in, that's who it's going to go to. I don't have Kevin De Bruyne personally, but if you did, I'd seriously look at him if you think he's going to start. That is it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to give it a like, subscribe if you're new around here as well. If you've got any comments about what I've said, if you disagree, agree, leave them below. Let me know if you've got any questions as well. And I'll be back tomorrow for the normal stream at 9 p.m. Going through your kind of questions and just generally just chatting about FPL as we do, nice and casual. And then back with normal content next week. Let's see what happens with all the matches, whether they get played behind closed doors, whether we get more postponements. Let's just take it as it comes. Like, these things happen in life. We just have to deal with it. There's no point kind of worrying about it. I take FPL as seriously as anyone. Like, it's my job. It's my hobby as well. Make videos every single week. But I'm kind of relaxed about these things, that they happen. It's annoying. I would have liked Aubameyang to have played against Man City as my captain, but he didn't. We move on and hope that not too much more disruption happens, and if it does, it does. You know, if it needs to be done for public safety, then I guess that's all that matters at the end of the day. All right, I've said my bit. I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will catch you later. Cheers all.